It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives, our son Noah's high school graduation. The auditorium was buzzing with excitement, filled with proud parents, friends, and relatives, all gathered to celebrate the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Noah, standing tall in his cap and gown, looked every bit the young man he had become. The tears in my eyes were a mix of pride and disbelief. Where had the time gone? Sarah, my wife, sat beside me, her eyes fixed on our son as he walked across the stage. But something about her seemed off. There was a distant look in her eyes, a subtle unease that didn't match the joy of the occasion. Her usual warmth was replaced by an unsettling silence. We had been married for nearly 2 decades, and over the years I had learned to recognize when something was wrong, even when she didn't say a word. As the applause erupted around us, I turned to her, ready to share in the pride and excitement of the moment. But she wasn't looking at me. She was staring ahead, almost as if she were lost in thought, disconnected from the celebration unfolding around her. My heart skipped a beat and a knot began to form in my stomach. Was something wrong with her? Was she hiding something? No sooner had I begun to push aside the growing discomfort than Sarah leaned over, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air, and I felt my world pause for a moment. Pregnant. How could this be? We hadn't planned for another child, not after all these years. I stared at her, stunned, unable to process the flood of emotions rushing through me. Was this some kind of joke, or was she being serious? As the celebration continued, my mind raced, but it wasn't the joy of our son's achievement that filled my thoughts. It was the confusion and disbelief sparked by Sarah's unexpected announcement. The atmosphere around us felt surreal, as if the world had shifted in an instant. I couldn't stop replaying Sarah's words in my head. "I'm pregnant." My mind was racing, and yet all I could do was stare at her in disbelief. Was she serious? Was she playing some cruel joke on me in the middle of our son's graduation? The thought of it made my stomach churn. I didn't know how to respond. What do you mean, pregnant?" I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile tension hanging between us. She turned to me, then her face unreadable, but her eyes held a strange kind of determination. "I'm pregnant," she repeated this time, her voice steady, almost too steady. "And it's yours." I felt the blood rush to my face, and the room seemed to tilt as I tried to absorb what she was saying. Yours. Of course it had to be mine. We'd been married for years, and we hadn't exactly been cautious about trying for another child in the past. But this didn't make sense. We hadn't even discussed the idea of having another baby. Our lives had been so busy lately, and with Noah graduating, we were already planning for the next chapter. We had so much to look forward to, so much ahead of us. This wasn't part of the plan. "Sarah, we never talked about this," I said, my voice now tinged with concern. How could this happen?" She looked down, her fingers nervously playing with the edge of her sleeve, avoiding my gaze. For a long moment, I thought she might say something more, explain herself. But when she spoke again, her voice was low and almost hesitant. "It wasn't planned, okay," she said. "But it's real, and I'm keeping the baby. I thought you needed to know." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I needed to know. Of course I needed to know, but this wasn't the way I expected to find out. Not in the middle of Noah's graduation, when everything was supposed to be about celebrating his future, a future that was now suddenly overshadowed by this shocking announcement. I wanted to say something, to argue, to ask every question that was racing through my mind, but instead, all I could do was nod. My emotions caught in a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. The noise around us seemed to fade into the background as I tried to process what she had just told me. But before I could say another word, Sarah stood up abruptly. "I'll let you think about it," she said, her voice softer now. "I know this isn't what you were expecting, but we'll figure it out. We have to. As she walked away, leaving me standing there in the midst of a celebration I no longer felt connected to, I couldn't help but wonder how everything had gotten so tangled. Our pregnancy was supposed to be a time of joy, but all I could feel was a growing sense of unease. What did this mean for our future? Was it really just an unexpected surprise, or was there something else lurking beneath the surface? The questions piled up, but no answers came. I turned back to the stage where Noah was taking his final bow as a high school graduate. He looked so proud, so full of hope, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my entire world had just been turned upside down. As I sat back down in the crowded auditorium, the clapping and cheering around me felt distant. The world had continued moving, but I was stuck in a whirlwind of confusion. My mind was reeling, racing to make sense of everything Sarah had just dropped on me. Pregnant. That was supposed to be something to celebrate, but instead it was a puzzle I couldn't solve. And that wasn't even the worst of it. No, the worst part was the nagging question that now consumed every inch of my thoughts. How could this be? How could she be pregnant with my child when everything about our relationship had seemed stable? Hadn't we been on the same page? We had our ups and downs, sure, but nothing that would make me question our bond. We had built a life together, raised a son, and supported each other through thick and thin. And yet here I was, facing an unknown future. The baby was mine, according to Sarah. But how could I be sure I wasn't blind? I had seen how distant Sarah had become over the last few months. She'd been more withdrawn her attention elsewhere, and even our intimacy had been less frequent. I had chalked it up to the stress of Noah's graduation and our hectic schedules, but now it seemed there was more to the story. I felt a tightening in my chest as another thought crept in. Was this something Sarah had planned? Was she hiding something from me? The questions kept coming one after the other, each more unsettling than the last. If Sarah was pregnant, how could she be so certain it was mine? There had been no discussion between us, no planning for another baby. Could it have been someone else's? I couldn't deny that a small voice inside me wondered if I was being naive. Was this all part of some bigger lie? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and I tried to shake it off, but it lingered. Was Sarah hiding something more sinister? Had she been seeing someone else? And if so, who was he? My mind turned to every little detail I could remember from the last few months, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the quiet phone calls she always seemed to take in private. Had I missed the signs? Had I been too trusting? The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. This wasn't how I had imagined this moment. Noah's graduation was supposed to be a time for us to be proud of our son, to celebrate his future, and the accomplishments we had made together as a family. Instead, it had been overshadowed by a revelation that turned everything upside down. How was I supposed to deal with this? How was I supposed to move forward with so many questions and so few answers? And then there was Noah, my son. How would he feel about all of this? He had been the light of our lives, and now I was forced to confront a truth that I wasn't ready to face. Was this the kind of example I wanted to set for him? A man who couldn't even trust his own wife, who couldn't even get a straight answer about something so important. My stomach twisted as I thought about how this would affect him, how this could change everything for our family. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, the reality of the situation began to sink in. There were so many things left unsaid, so many questions I needed answers to. But Sarah wasn't around to give them to me. She had walked away from the conversation, leaving me to sort through this mess on my own. I felt the anger rising within me. How could she just leave me to deal with this, to figure out what had happened? Didn't she owe me an explanation? Didn't I deserve the truth? I looked around the auditorium once more, my mind still swirling. Noah had finished his speech and was now mingling with his friends. I was happy for him, of course, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I thought I knew about my life My family was suddenly in question. Was this the end of the life I knew, or just the beginning of a new chapter? One that I didn't want to read. The days following Sarah's revelation felt like a blur. I tried to keep everything together for Noah to focus on his graduation and the life we had always planned, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The pregnancy. Her sudden announcement, the way she had left me with no clear answers, it didn't sit right with me. There were too many things that didn't add up. It wasn't just the timing that bothered me. It was everything else, the small signs, the odd behavior, the things I had brushed off before, but now seemed glaringly obvious. In the weeks leading up to Noah's graduation, I had noticed Sarah acting differently. She had become more distant, withdrawn, and I couldn't remember the last time we'd had a real conversation. We hadn't been arguing, but there was a coldness between us, a silence that spoke volumes. I tried to ignore it at first. We were busy with work, the preparations for Noah's big day, the usual stuff that took up most of our time. But now, in the aftermath of Sarah's announcement, I couldn't deny the weight of the situation. I couldn't ignore the way she had been avoiding me or the late nights she had started to keep. Sometimes she would go out for what seemed like no reason at all, leaving me to wonder where she was going and who she was with. There were always excuses, meetings, errands, things that needed to be done, but they never seemed to add up, and I never thought to question them until now. There was one night a few weeks before graduation when Sarah came home late, her eyes red as if she had been crying. I asked her about it, concerned, but she dismissed it with a quick, "I'm just stressed out." I let it go, but in hindsight, I couldn't help but wonder what had really been going on. Was she feeling guilty? Was she hiding something? I didn't want to think that, but the doubts were beginning to gnaw at me. Then there were the phone calls. She had become incredibly protective of her phone, always taking it into another room when it rang or when she received a message. She never used to be like that. We used to share everything, texts, calls, the little things that kept us connected. But now it was as if she had something to hide. I tried to tell myself that maybe I was overthinking it, but deep down I knew there was more to it than she was letting on. And then there was the strange behavior around the pregnancy itself. When I had asked Sarah how far along she was, she hesitated before giving me an answer. At first she said it was just a few weeks, but later when I mentioned it to a friend who was a doctor, they seemed confused. According to my friend, a woman who was a few weeks along in a pregnancy would have already missed a period and would have certain physical signs, things that Sarah hadn't shown. But when I brought it up to her, she brushed it off with a smile, saying it was just early. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't ignore the fact that it didn't add up. The more I thought about it, the more suspicious I became. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something wasn't right. I knew Sarah better than anyone, and I could tell when she was hiding something from me. But I still couldn't bring myself to confront her again. I wanted to believe her, to trust her, but the signs were there, staring me in the face. There was one night, a few days before Noah's graduation, when Sarah went out with friends to celebrate. When she came home, I could smell the faint scent of cologne on her clothes, a fragrance I didn't recognize. I didn't say anything that night, but I couldn't stop wondering. Was it just a coincidence, or was it a sign of something more? Had she been with someone else? Everything felt like a jigsaw puzzle that was falling apart, and I was struggling to find the missing pieces. I wanted to trust Sarah. I wanted to believe that this pregnancy was real, that everything was fine, but every time I thought about it, the questions grew louder, the doubts more intense, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being kept in the dark. I needed answers. I needed the truth. But how could I get it? How could I confront her when I wasn't even sure what I was asking? My mind was racing, and the more I tried to make sense of it, all the more uncertain I became. The signs were there, but the answers were still out of reach. The phone call came late at night, just when I thought I could finally go to bed and shut my mind off for a few hours. I had barely slept in the past week, and my thoughts had been consumed with everything that was happening. But sleep, was a distant dream now. There was no escaping the feeling that my life was spiraling out of control, and I couldn't seem to hold on to anything solid. I saw Sarah's name flash across my phone screen, and for a moment I almost didn't answer. I was tired of the lies, the confusion, and the endless questions. I had been trying to piece together the fragments of our relationship, but nothing made sense anymore. But I answered anyway, knowing that if I didn't, I would only wonder what she had to say. "Hey," she said, her voice soft but distant. I could tell something was off. It wasn't the usual way she spoke to me, the way she would say my name like she still cared. No, this was colder, more guarded. "Sarah, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the tension building in my chest. "What's really going on with you, with us?" There was a long pause before she answered, and when she did, her voice cracked. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." The words sent a chill down my spine. I had a feeling I wasn't ready to hear whatever it was, but I had no choice. I needed the truth, even if it destroyed me. "It's about the baby," she continued. "It's not yours." I couldn't breathe for a second. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the room spinning as the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. What I managed to choke out my heart pounding in my ears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It's not yours. It's my brother's." Her words were like a slap in the face. My brain struggled to process what she was saying. I felt like I was suffocating, and everything around me became a blur. My brother. How could they do this to me? I didn't know what to say. I felt numb, like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My world had shattered in an instant, and I couldn't put the pieces back together. "I didn't want to tell you this way." She continued, her voice filled with guilt. "But I couldn't keep lying to you anymore. I've been trying to figure out how to explain it. But there's no good way to say it. I'm so sorry." I couldn't even respond. I just stood there, my mind reeling, my body frozen. How long had this been going on? How had she kept this secret from me? And why did it have to come out like this, at Noah's graduation no less? Why hadn't she told me before? Why hadn't I seen the signs? I thought about my brother Jason, the man who had always been there for me, who had always seemed to care about our family. How could he have done this to me? How could he betray me in the worst way possible? And how could Sarah be the one to let it happen? The anger and betrayal surged through me like a tidal wave, but all I could do was stand there, frozen, unable to move. "I'm so sorry," Sarah repeated. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted it to be like this." But her words felt hollow now. All I could think about was the lie that had torn apart everything I thought I knew, the trust that had been shattered, the love that had been twisted into something unrecognizable. There was no going back from this. I couldn't unhear what she had said. I don't know what to say. I finally whispered the words, tasting like acid in my mouth. "I don't know who you are anymore." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Sarah wasn't the woman I thought I knew. My brother wasn't the man I had trusted, and I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I hung up the phone without another word, my hands shaking. The reality of what Sarah had told me crashed over me, but I still couldn't make sense of it. How could everything have unraveled so quickly? How had I missed the signs I had trusted both of them with my life, with everything I held dear? And now, in one horrifying moment, that trust was gone. I didn't know how to move forward from this. I didn't know how to look at Sarah the same way again. I didn't know how to face my brother. But what I did know, without a doubt, was that my life would never be the same. The truth had come crashing down, and there was no undoing it. The nightmare wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the destruction of everything I thought I knew, my family, my future, my trust. It was all gone, and I was left standing in the ruins, wondering how I would ever pick up the pieces. The next morning, I could hardly breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed under the weight of everything that had come to light. I was still reeling from the phone call, and now I had no choice but to confront Sarah. The lies, the betrayal, everything was suffocating me, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to face her, had to get the truth from her face to face, no more hiding behind excuses or evasions. I waited for her to come home. Every minute that ticked by felt like an eternity. I knew she'd be coming back from her work or errands soon, and I couldn't stand the thought of letting this drag on any longer. I had to know why. Why her brother? Why me? Why now? The questions were flooding my mind, but nothing could prepare me for the confrontation that was about to unfold. When Sarah walked through the door, I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the hesitation, the fear. She must have known I was already aware of the truth, but she didn't say anything at first. I didn't give her the chance to. "Sarah," I said, my voice tight with anger, "we need to talk." Her face paled, and for a moment she stood there frozen. I could see her struggling for words, trying to find a way to justify the unthinkable. But I didn't want to hear excuses anymore. I needed her to be honest, to tell me everything. No more secrets, no more lies. I didn't know how to tell you," she started, her voice shaky. "I never wanted you to find out this way. I never wanted to hurt you." I scoffed, the pain in my chest rising. "You didn't want to hurt me. You've already done that. You've done more than that. You've destroyed everything. Our family, my trust in you, and for what? What could be worth that?" She flinched, her eyes brimming with tears, but I wasn't in the mood for sympathy. I needed answers. "I'm sorry, I really am," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. I thought it would be easier if I just kept it a secret." "Easier," I repeated, incredulity flooding through me. "You thought it would be easier to lie to me, to sleep with my brother, to have his child and keep it all hidden. How is that easier? How is this, any of this easier?" I don't know," she stammered. "I made a mistake, a huge mistake, but it wasn't just about the baby. There was so much more going on between me and Jason. Things that I didn't understand. Things that spiraled out of control." I shook my head, the anger in me boiling over. "You've got to be kidding me. My brother. How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me?" It started a few months ago. It wasn't planned. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, but we just got closer, and then one thing led to another, and then I found out I was pregnant." My heart sank even further. The thought of them together. The betrayal, it felt like a weight I couldn't carry. And yet here we were talking about it like it was just some unfortunate mistake. "Do you even understand what you've done to me? To our family?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. "This isn't just about the pregnancy. This is about trust. This is about you breaking something that was supposed to be unbreakable." She reached out for me, but I stepped back, unable to let her touch me. Don't try to make this easier for yourself. You made your choice, you betrayed me. You betrayed our family, and now I have to live with the fact that the woman I loved, the mother of my son, chose my brother over me." She collapsed onto the couch, her sobs filling the room. I wanted to feel sorry for her, but the anger and hurt inside me drowned out any sympathy I might have had. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't listen to her apologies. She had made her choice, and I was left picking up the pieces. "Do you love him?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Her face twisted with pain. "No, I don't know. I don't know what happened. I was confused. It was a mistake. Please, just understand, I never wanted to hurt you." But I didn't understand. I didn't know how to understand. How could I? This wasn't just a mistake. This was betrayal on a level I could never have imagined. And now we were here standing on the edge of something that could never be fixed. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. But for the first time in a long time, I knew that whatever happened next, I had to take control of my own life. Sarah had broken everything between us, and I couldn't keep pretending like it wasn't broken. The following days felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The moment I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. It wasn't just Sarah and I now. No, the entire family had been pulled into this mess, and I had no idea how to make sense of it all. Every corner I turned, I was confronted by either Sarah's guilt or my brother's avoidance. It was as if we were all trapped in a cage made of secrets and lies, and no one knew how to break free. The worst part was when my parents got involved. It was inevitable, I guess. They had to know eventually. But when the conversation finally happened, I didn't expect it to hit me the way it did. My dad, always the calm, collected figure in our family, sat there with a look in his eyes that I had never seen before. Disappointment, anger, and a strange kind of regret. Mom, too, looked like she had been hit by a freight train. She kept shaking her head, unable to understand how everything had unraveled so quickly. "Jason," my father asked, breaking the tense silence as we all sat in the living room. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and for a moment I couldn't find my voice. How did this happen? How did it come to this? I didn't know what to say. How could I explain what I had no words for? My brother had betrayed me. And Sarah, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, had turned into someone I didn't recognize. My own parents, who had always been there for us, were now sitting in judgment, looking for answers I didn't have. I didn't know Dad. I finally said, my voice hollow. I didn't know any of this was going on. Mom's face crumpled as she reached out, grabbing my hand. "Jason, honey, we've always taught you to trust your family. We raised you to believe that family was everything. How did this happen?" Her voice was filled with pain, and I could see the tears gathering in her eyes, though she tried to hide them. I could hardly look at her. How could I explain that the person she had always trusted, the person who she thought was her son's pillar of support, had betrayed everything they stood for? The shame of it all. This twisted version of family I was now living in felt suffocating. "I don't know," I whispered, feeling utterly defeated. "But it happened. Mom, it happened." Dad leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, his gaze hardening as if he were trying to process something he couldn't quite grasp. "You're telling me that this was all a mistake? That everything was some kind of mess up and we're supposed to just move on?" The silence that followed was thick with unresolved tension. It was clear that both of them, my parents, had no idea how to handle this. They had never expected something like this to happen, and neither had I. They had always been proud of the family we had built, and now it felt like everything was crumbling at the seams. "I'm trying, Dad. I'm really trying to make sense of all this. But how do you move on from something like this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't even know who I was talking to anymore, whether it was my parents, my brother, or even myself. I was lost in a sea of confusion and pain. Mom squeezed my hand tighter. "We will get through this, Jason. We're a family. We've been through worse, remember?" But I wasn't so sure anymore. How could I look my brother in the eye after what he had done? How could I ever trust Sarah again? The pieces of my life had scattered, and I wasn't sure how to put them back together. The very foundation of my family had been shaken, and no one knew how to rebuild from the ruins. The conflict was no longer just about me and Sarah. It wasn't just about betrayal and heartbreak. It was about our entire family and the walls that had been built between us. In the wake of this revelation, I could feel the weight of my brother's absence at that table, the empty space where he should have been. It wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of everything we had stood for as a family, and no one knew how to move forward. When I saw my son Tyler standing at the door of my study, I immediately knew that everything was about to change. He had been quiet lately, ever since the graduation, ever since the news came crashing down on our family. He hadn't said much, keeping to himself, trying to stay out of the storm that had taken over our lives. But now, standing there, he was no longer the little boy I used to protect. He was a young man who had been forced to confront a truth that no one should ever have to face. "Dad." Tyler said, his voice low and hesitant. He seemed almost unsure, as though he didn't know how to approach the conversation or what to say. But the look in his eyes, the hurt and confusion written all over his face, told me everything. He had been holding it in his anger, his disappointment, his confusion. And now it was finally time for him to speak. I stood up from my chair, my heart heavy, and motioned for him to sit down. But he didn't move. Instead, he took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. Then with a hard look in his eyes, he finally spoke. "Why, Dad? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice cracking with emotion. "Why did you keep all of this from me? I had to hear it from everyone else, not from you." I felt the sharp sting of his words. He was right, and there was nothing I could say to defend myself. How could I explain that I had been trying to protect him? How could I justify that I was too caught up in my own pain to notice the hurt building in him? As much as I tried to shield him from the reality of the situation, it had already reached him. And now I was the one who was failing him. "I didn't know how to tell you, Tyler," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want you to have to deal with this. You were supposed to have a happy graduation. You were supposed to feel proud." He shook his head, his eyes filled with disbelief. "A happy graduation? Dad, you honestly think I could just forget about everything that happened? You think I could just ignore the fact that you've been lied to, that everything we've known has been a lie?" His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had failed him. I had failed as a father, and there was no way to undo it. All I wanted was to shield him from the hurt, but in doing so, I had made things worse. "I know I've let you down, Tyler," I said, my throat tight, "but please just know that I never wanted you to see any of this. You didn't deserve to be a part of it." Tyler's face softened, and for a moment I thought he might say something to reassure me. But instead, he just looked away, a single tear slipping down his cheek. "I'm not a kid anymore, Dad. I can handle things. I just wanted you to be honest with me. I wanted to know the truth from you." The silence that followed was deafening. We sat there locked in a moment of grief and regret, the weight of the world on both of our shoulders. I had failed him as a father in the most painful way possible. And now, all I could do was hope that he would eventually find it in himself to forgive me. The days following the confrontation with Tyler were a blur. My heart was heavy, and the weight of what I had done, or rather, what I had failed to do, felt unbearable. I knew I had hurt him, and there was no easy way to fix it, but I had to try. As a father, I owed him more than silence and excuses. I owed him the truth, even if it meant facing the pain that came with it. I started spending more time with Tyler, slowly trying to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't easy. He was distant, guarded, and rightfully so. He had every reason to be angry at me, but I couldn't sit back and let the gap between us grow wider. I needed him to know that I was trying to change, that I was doing everything I could to make things right. One afternoon, I found him in the backyard sitting alone on the swing. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the garden, and for a brief moment, everything seemed peaceful. I took a deep breath and walked over to him, unsure of what to say, but I had to speak. "Tyler," I began, my voice shaky, "I know I can't undo what's been done. I can't change the past, but I need you to know that I'm truly sorry. I failed you, and I hurt you in ways I'll never be able to fix. But I'm trying, son. I'm trying to be the father you deserve." He didn't say anything at first, just kept his gaze on the horizon. The silence felt like an eternity, and I feared that my words might have been in vain. But then he turned to look at me, his expression softer than I had seen in days. "I know you're trying, Dad," he said quietly. I just need time. I need to process everything, but I'm not giving up on you. Not yet." His words hit me harder than anything else he had said. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was hope. And that was all I could ask for. I knew that rebuilding our relationship would take time, effort, and patience. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. In the months that followed, everything changed. The house that once echoed with laughter now held a quieter tone, one of healing, of rebuilding, of reflection. My wife, now living separately, had given birth I didn't attend. It wasn't out of bitterness, but because I needed to draw a boundary, one that protected what little peace I was starting to find. Tyler and I slowly found common ground. We started small talks over dinner, watching games together, awkward silences that turned into real conversations. He was still hurting, and so was I, but we were trying. And for the first time, trying felt like enough. As for my brother, I haven't seen him since that night. I heard from a mutual friend that he moved out of state. I could chase down apologies, demand closure, but I've learned something more powerful. Sometimes, peace means letting go, not getting even. I started writing again, something I hadn't done since college. It was messy at first, just scattered thoughts and late-night reflections, but over time it became a way to process, to heal. Through the chaos, I rediscovered myself, not as a husband or a victim, but as a father and as a man who survived betrayal and chose growth instead of bitterness. This wasn't the life I expected, but it's the one I have now, and every day I'm choosing to live it with honesty, strength, and hope.